Good morning. So today we will be starting with the Mendelian genetics and its extension. And these are the reference books which I've used to make my PowerPoint. So we have Russell I Genetics, Klug and Cummings, Stroostad and Simmons, Benjamin Pierce, Bruker, and obviously Strickberger. And these are the topics which we will be going through one by one when we'll be doing this particular chapter. So now let's come to the molecule of life. So it's DNA, as you can see in the structure. This is a summary of the structure of DNA, where the arrangement of the double helix has been shown. This is the sugar phosphate backbone. The bases are protruding inward, and you can see the bases are forming hydrogen bonds which hold the two DNA strands together. But when we are moving into something past, this molecule, the structure was discovered in around 1953-54. But when we are talking about Mendelism, as I said, we'll be dealing with Mendel today. So his work was in and around 1856 to 1863. So you can imagine. So today we'll be walking 100 years back from the moment DNA was discovered. So when Mendel postulated his hypothesis and when he did his experiments, he was not aware about at the molecular level, how the DNA looks. He was not aware of that. In fact, at that time, nobody was aware about that. But now we know this is the DNA, and we also know that a sequence of DNA is a gene. And I've again and again repeated, any sequence of DNA that is giving a biological product is a gene. If the biological product is protein, in this particular diagram, as you can see, a sequence of DNA is giving a product mRNA, and the mRNA is then again translated to give the product protein. So if the sequence of DNA is giving a final biological product as protein, these genes are often referred to as structural genes. But there are some sequences of DNA which often give a product such as the ribosomal RNA or the transfer RNA, which are not decoded into a polypeptide. So those those DNA sequences which give rise to a final biological product, which is a RNA, as in ribosomal RNA or in transfer RNA, these DNA sequences are known as functional gene. And we are all aware of this phrase that the gene expression consists of the transcription of DNA into mRNA and the decoding of the mRNA into the polypeptide. So that is what is the concept of central dogma. But this concept of central dogma developed only after, in 1953-54, the DNA was discovered, followed by the proposal of the central dogma by Crick. So this is the present era. But as I said, we are going to walk back in the past. Just a second. Now let us look into the timeline. You can see Mendel's work being published in 1860. But when Mendel's work was published, given the volume of work he did, and given the importance of the work he did, incidentally, at that time, even though there was much interest in hereditary genetics, but no one noticed that Mendel had discovered the basic principles of genetics, or basic principles of inheritance. It was in 1900s to 1910 that his whole work was rediscovered. So this rediscovery was done by three botanists, Hugo de Vries. It was in 1900 that this rediscovery was done by Hugo de Vries, Eric von Zermatt, and Carl Correns. You are aware of these three names. So they rediscovered the Mendel's work, and it was then that other scientists were coming up with the chromosomal inheritance theory, and they could correlate Mendel's work with those theories that were developing by then. Moving to so that was around 1910s. As you can see, gradually, next that developed was, so it was the rediscovery of Mendel's work, and next that came up was a chromosome theory of inheritance, and transmission genetics evolved. So this chromosome theory of inheritance and transmission genetics, it took a time frame to develop from 1900s to 1930s, And as we are approaching towards 1950s, you can very well assume you are all aware of that. It was era of molecular genetics, because in 1950s to 60s, the DNA structure was discovered and DNA was shown to carry the genetic information. So that developed in the year 1950s, 60s. And not only that, with the discovery of DNA, the subject molecular biology also developed, because it came to notice to everybody that it is indeed the DNA is actually carrying the genetic information based on which the next generation will develop. But remember, when this was discovered, when this was realized, just look at Mendel. He was back in 1860. He was not aware of any of these phenomena that developed in the later years. And it was on his work. So his work, that's Mendel's rediscovery of the work, formed a benchmark on which the later transmission genetics, inheritance genetics developed. And then, as we know now, that from 1970 onwards, once with the discovery of DNA, a whole new domain opened up. Recombinant DNA technology, DNA cloning, genomics, everything began. So that is basically the timeline that happened. This timeline shows when Mendel's work was published, and then the development of in the field of genetics and molecular biology thereafter. So now we come to the father of genetics. He is very much, you all aware of this terminology that he is often referred to as the father of genetics. And let's look into his biodata. Gregor Johann Mendel was born in July 1822. His father's and mother's name was Anton and Rosanne Mendel. He was born in his family farm, which was then in Heisendorf, Austria, which is now a part of the Czech Republic. He spent his early youth in the rural setting, and a local schoolmaster was impressed by his aptitude and expressed that he should be sent to a secondary school in Troppau to continue his education. His parents were simple farmers, but he achieved a sound education and was admitted to the Augustine monastery in Brno in September 1943. Now, as you can see, this is the picture of the Mendel family house, and the farmstead are still preserved and contain a memorial exhibition to Gregor Mendel. And this is where Mendel was born. And just now I was talking about the Augustinian monastery. So this is the Augustinian monastery in Old Brno. There what happened is that he excelled at teaching, and the abbot of the monastery recommended him for further study at the University of Vienna, where he attended from 1851 to 53. After he again returns in 1853, after 2 years study in Vienna, he returned to Brno, where he taught in school and began his experimental work in the backyard of the monastery with pea plants. And he conducted a series of breeding experiments from 1856 to 1863. And he published his results publicly at the Brno National Science Society in 1865. Mendel's paper from this lecture was published in 1866. But as I said, he was a visionary of his time. So when at that time, even though there was widespread interest in genetics, no one recognized the volume and the importance of Mendel's work. In 1868, Mendel was elected the abbot of his monastery. And as a result of his increasing administrative duties, it brought an end to his teaching and eventually his experiment in genetics. And he died at the age of 61 on January 6, 1984, unrecognized for his contributions. So when he died in 1884, he never knew that what his experimental results would create in the next era. And as I said, the significance of Mendel's work was rediscovered, was appreciated in 1900, almost 26 years later, by Hugo de Vries, Erich von Zermatt, and Karl Krohns, who began conducting similar such experiments independently and arrived at conclusions similar to those of Mendel. Now, this is another picture. Just a second. This is another beautiful picture of the Augustinian monastery. And now, when we are moving into Mendelism, let us look into the relationship between genotype and phenotype. Remember, genotype is the genetic constitution of an individual. And when we talk about genetic constitution, that is dependent on something. Obviously, that is dependent on the environmental events, influence, and random development events, because environment, nature is playing an important role on the genetic constitution of an individual. And as a result, what we see externally is the phenotypic expression or the physical expression of the physical trait. So this is how genotype and phenotype are related. And before entering into Mendelism, some concepts to revise: gene, a genetic factor that helps to determine a characteristic. At that time, since Mendel was unaware of what the exact definition of gene was, he just mentioned those factors, those factors, those factors, but we know what a gene is. Allele, one or two more alternate forms of a gene. For example, let us go, since we are doing Mendelism, we are going to restrict ourselves to the characters that Mendel looked into. So we all know that there's a tall plant and a dwarf plant. So what is the character here? The character here is height. Now this height can be expressed in two alternative forms, the tall form and the dwarf form. So those are alleles. So the same character is being expressed when there is this capital T or capital T, small t, we are getting a tall plant. And when there is a small t, we are getting a dwarf plant. These alternative forms are known as alleles. Now coming to locus. Locus is a specific place on a chromosome occupied by an allele. So the position where an allele is sitting is a locus. Genotype is a set of alleles possessed by an individual organism. Heterozygote, you're all aware what a heterozygote is. Again, if I go by Mendelism, this is a pure tall plant. So this is homozygous. This is a heterozygous tall plant. That is, it is having one allele of capital T and other allele of small t. Now there is an interesting concept here that develops. See, look, this is capital T, and this is capital T, small t, and yet both of them will phenotypically give rise to a tall plant. So externally, what I'm seeing is a tall plant, but if you look at the genotype of the homozygote is capital T, capital T. So it is having both the alleles of a taller height. And the genotype of the heterozygote is capital T, small t. So it is having a tall allele and a dwarf allele, but it is expressing the characteristic pattern of a tall plant. So automatically you can assume that the tall allele somehow seems to be overriding the expression of the small t allele or the dwarf allele. So capital T is dominant to small t. We'll come to that dominance concept once more, just to explain heterozygote and homozygote, and I showed you here. So in a heterozygote condition, we need to study which allele's expression is being expressed phenotypically. The allele which is being expressed phenotypically is the dominant allele. Now, phenotypic or trait, the appearance or manifestation of a character. The character or characteristic is an attribute or feature. So these are some of the common terminologies that will come again on and off when we'll be studying Mendelian genetics. Now, as I said, why pea plants? So the flowers of these plants are bisexual. They are self-pollinating. Self and cross-pollination can be easily performed. The physical characters, this is very important, were easy to recognize and study. So there were distinct set of physical characters. Round seed, wrinkled seed. So these are distinct characters. Yellow color, green color. Tall plant, dwarf plant. There was no mixture of characters. So the characters could be distinctly seen and studied. This was where Mendel was in luck. And another important thing, they were shorter lifespan and are very easy to maintain. So this was the few features why Mendel chose the pea plant. And now let us look into the characters which Mendel used. Initially, when Mendel started with the 34 varieties of pea plant, and so when he started his work, he started with the 34 varieties of peas and spent 2 years selecting those varieties that he would use in his experiments. In his experiments, he ensured that he starts with a pure breeding. Pure breeding means the two alleles should be homozygous. So pure breeding means it should be capital T, or it should be round RR. It can be yellow. So they are pure breeding, homozygous for the allele concern. And how did he ensure this homozygosity? He ensured this homozygosity by growing the plants for 2 generations and confirming that all offspring were the same as their parents. So he ensured that he interbred them for 2 generations and ensured that all the offspring were the same. Now let us look into the 7 characteristics Mendel used in his studies. He chose the seed color of endosperm. So you can see the distinct difference in color, yellow-green. He chose the seed shape, round, wrinkled. Seed coat color, gray-white. Pod color, yellow-green. Pod shape, inflected, constricted. Just a second. And then we have what did he chose flower position. So the flower position is the axion along stem length and terminal at tip of stem. So the flower position and obviously the stem length, which we famously say is the tall plant and the short plant. So you can see there are 7 basic characteristics that Mendel chose while doing his experiments for the pea plant. Doing his experiments with the pea plant, sorry, not for. Now, so as you can see, he did these experiments. So this is the experiment with seed shape, seed color. And you can see all round F1. So first generation for seed shape all round, which is evident that round is dominant to wrinkled, as I said. And you can see for the F2 results, there are 5,474 round and 1,850 wrinkled. So this is the count of seeds. And the ratio he observed was 2.96, that is approximately 3:1. When he did the experiment with seed color, again he saw 6022 yellow, so yellow is dominant, all yellow. F1 was all yellow, then 6022 yellow and 2001 green, it's 2001 green. And again, the ratio is 3.01 to 1. So whenever he was doing this kind of experiments, the F1 results showed 1 phenotypic characteristics. And the moment he did this F1, interbred the F1 plants, he got the F2 results. And in the F2 results, he saw that there were 2 varieties of, phenotypically there were 2 varieties of plants. And these two varieties of plants, the obvious ratio in most cases was hovering around this figure 3. So it is 3:1 ratio. And thus, he started formulating his two laws. Mendel reasoned that the F1 plants display the phenotype of only one parent. That is a fact. You can see all the F1 results display the phenotype of one parent. But when we are seeing the F2 generation, we are seeing the characteristic of both the parents. So it is a fact that in the F1 plants have inherited the allele of both the parents. Even though phenotypically expression of one category is being seen, but it is evident that the F1 is inheriting both the alleles, because in the F2 plants, what we are seeing is that we are seeing two categories of plants which are expressing the two characters, phenotypic characters that we started with. That is, it is expressing the two characters of the parents. So even in F1, we are seeing a single character, but in F2, what happened is that they are segregating, the characters are segregating. So he concluded that each plant therefore must possess two genetic factors encoding a character. Second, he concluded the two alleles in each plant separate when gametes are found, and one allele goes into each gamete. Now, if we look into the category of round and wrinkled, according to Mendel, the Mendel's F1 inherited the round allele from the round-seeded plant and the wrinkled allele from the wrinkled-seeded plant. In the F1 generation, only the trait encoded by the round allele was observed in the F1. However, when we are getting a F2 plant, we are seeing that the F2 plants are having the trait of some of the almost in the ratio 3/4 plants are showing the trait of the round allele, and 1/4 of the plants are showing the trait of the wrinkled allele. So from this law of equal segregation, gradually a concept that developed from Mendel's work was the concept of dominance. Because in F1, even though the plants are, the plants are having two alleles, one round and one wrinkled, but when we are looking into the phenotypic expression, we are seeing that the plant is round. That means obviously the round allele is somewhat masking the phenotypic expression of the wrinkled allele. Now, when we are talking about Mendel's law of segregation, once more, gene is a hereditary factor. Each plant has a pair of this type of gene. The gene comes in two forms called alleles. Phonetically, when we call a gene Y, that's how they spell it, Y gene. So it's Y, which stands for the yellow phenotype. Then if the F1 is Y, see all yellow, so that is the dominant, then the recessive will be represented as small y. It will not be written as small g. The recessive phenotype symbol is denoted with respect to the dominant phenotype symbol. So if the dominant allele is capital Y, then the recessive allele will be small y. When we are thinking of the three categories of combinations we can obtain from capital Y, small y, it can be capital Y, capital Ly. This is homozygous tall. It can be capital Y, small y, which is heterozygous tall, or it can be small y, that is green. To show that the alleles are present in pairs, this is how an allele is written. Capital Y, comma, slash, capital Y, small y. That's how they are written. This is the homozygous condition. This is the heterozygous condition. As I said, the Y allele dominance, and so the phenotype will be yellow. Y allele is a dominant allele and small y is the recessive allele. In meiosis, members of a gene pair separate equally into the eggs and the sperm. This equal separation has become known as Mendel's first law or law of equal segregation. So each gamete contains one member of the gene pair. This is important. During fertilization, when gametes fuse randomly, regardless of what alleles they bear, accordingly the phenotypes are produced. We have by now understood what a homozygote means and heterozygote means. When a cross is being done with respect to one gene, it is called a monohybrid cross. And gradually, we'll see that when a cross is being done with respect to two genes, it is known as a dihybrid cross. So that is the basics of Mendelian thought process. And now, we move on to the monohybrid cross. So this is a pictorial representation of showing you a locus. You can see the locus. One is the round allele and the other is the wrinkled allele. This is a heterozygous setup where we are having the combination of, this is how the combination is present here. Now let us look at this experiment. So what Mendel did, he crossed varieties of peas and they were self-fertilized. So Mendel removed the anthers from flowers to prevent self-fertilization. Since peas have this basic nature of self-fertilization, so he removed the anthers to prevent self-fertilization and dusted the stigma with pollen from a different plant. So he did this to ensure that cross-fertilization occurred. And then the fertilization took place, the seeds grow, and we are having homozygous round seed. So capital R into homozygous wrinkled seed. By now we have realized that capital R is dominant to small r. So from this cross, we will always get this combination. Just capital R, small r. This, phenotypically, these were round seeds. So this was the F1 generation. Now, he self-fertilized the F1 generation, as we know. So this is what he observed. The F1 seeds were round. So this was the genotypic constitution of the F1 plant seeds. Now what happens? Now let's look what happens. So let me write it in small. So we started with capital R into small r. This is cross-fertilization, F1. Now, this is self-fertilization. We fertilize it with another round seed. So this plant will produce two categories of gametes, capital R, small r. This one will also produce two categories of gametes, capital R, small r. Now, if we fuse, so we'll be getting one zygote or one plant, capital R, small r. Another zygote, capital R, small r. Now this is also capital R, small r. And finally, small r, small r. So all these plants, phenotypically, they are round. So that is what this is, 3/4 of the 4 plants, 3/4 is round. And this one, is phenotypically, the last one is phenotypically wrinkled. So 1/4 is wrinkled. So this is this famous 3:1 ratio of the Mendelian monohybrid cross. So that's what I showed you. And he did it, as I said, he counted the number of seeds. He self-fertilized the plants and he counted the number of seeds. And what he got was 5474 round seeds, 3/4 round, and 1850 wrinkled seeds, that is 1/4 wrinkled. So the conclusion was that the traits of the parents do not blend. There is no mixing between the round character and the wrinkled character. When Mendel said that, because we know now this concept of incomplete dominance. As I said, Mendel was lucky not to have looked into the phenomena of incomplete dominance. It was his luck that he chose the pea plant. So when Mendel did these experiments again and again, and he always came to this conclusion that when you take one gene pair in consideration, and if you follow this setup, parental generation F1 and F2, the output is always 3/4 of a dominant phenotype and 1/4 of the recessive phenotype. In the F1, we are getting the dominant phenotype. There is no blending of characters. So only we are seeing the round seed. But when the round seeds in the F1 generation are self-fertilized, we are getting segregation of the two different characters. We are getting 3/4 round and 1/4 wrinkled. So this was that important part of segregation. So the traits of the plants do not blend. Although the F1 plants display the phenotype of one parent, both the traits are passed to F2 progeny in a ratio 3:1. So that was the first part of Mendelian. Now, as I said, when Mendel did these experiments on monohybrid cross, automatically the concept that came up was the law of segregation, which we just now discussed, that the F1 progenies are of one phenotype, but in the F2, we are getting the two parental phenotypes again back. So automatically, a concept that came up, that a concept that developed was the concept of dominance. Now let's see into this. So we are starting with a homozygous round seed, capital R, and a homozygous wrinkled seed, small r, small r. And we are getting capital R gametes, small r gametes. And we know fertilization will take place. So what are the... So as a result of zygote formation, we are getting capital R, small r zygote. And interestingly, even though there is a small r present, the phenotypic character of the seed is a reflection of the capital R. So it seems that capital R is somehow able to prevent the expression of small r. That means in the F1 generation, we have crossed in the parental generation, the cross was done between a round seed and a wrinkled seed. And in the F1, we are getting a round seed. So obviously, the allele coding the round character is it's dominant about, on the allele coding for the wrinkled character. So this is where the concept of dominance develops. And then, as we did it in the previous slide, so we have this self-fertilization takes place. We have another. So now it's two round seeds, two F1 generation plants were self-fertilized. And in self-fertilization, the two plants will produce this two category of gametes. And I showed you in the previous slide that we will be getting 1/4 homozygous round. This is 3/4 round, of which 1/4 will be capital R, 2/4 will be a combination of capital R, small r, and 1/4 will be a combination of small r, small r. So you can see the original characters of the parents round and the original characters of the parents wrinkled are being segregated in F2 generation, even though in F1 generation, we only observed the round seeds. So this is how we developed this law of segregation and the concept that obviously since in F1, the round seeds are present. So it seems that the round allele is capable of masking the effect of the wrinkled allele, and the round is dominant to wrinkled. So that is how the concept of dominance developed. And in the F3 generation, these were again self-fertilized. Just showing you the F3. Again, F3, he self-fertilized. Whenever you self-fertilize a capital R small r into a capital R small r, remember the ratio will be always 3:1. If you do it in a checkerboard, you'll always again and again, whenever you cross two heterozygous plants, the ratio will be 3/4 homozygous plus heterozygous dominant and 1/4 recessive homozygous plant. So again and again, he got that round seed 3/4 and wrinkled seed 1/4. So this is how Mendel gradually built up his law of segregation and law of dominance. And from this slide, the take-home message is that whenever we have a cross of a heterozygous plant with another heterozygous plant, as per the law of segregation, in the next generation, 3/4 will phenotypically express the dominant character and 1/4 will express the recessive character. So they will always segregate in the ratio 3:1. Thus, coming to the principle, Mendel's principle of segregation and independent assortment, the principle of segregation states that each individual diploid organism possesses two alleles for any particular characteristics. For example, remember, we started with capital R into small r. These two alleles separate when gametes are formed. Evidently, they're separated when gametes are formed. Step by step, I'm going over the law. So they're separated when gametes are formed. And one allele goes into each gamete. Again, a fact. A gamete is formed. Furthermore, the two alleles segregate into gametes in equal proportions. So we have one capital R smaller here and another capital R smaller here. So they have segregated in equal proportions. That's the law of segregation part. And the concept of dominance says that when the two different alleles are present in a genotype, only the trait encoded by one of them, here the trait is encoded by the dominant allele, is observed in the phenotype because these plants are round plants. So each individual possesses two alleles. Alleles separate when gametes form, alleles separate in equal proportions. And the second law is alleles are different, loci separate independently. We have not come to that. That is this was done with the dihybrid experiment. So when we'll be doing the dihybrid, I'll be explaining that. So hopefully you have understand the segregation, Mendel's law of segregation. Diagrammatically, I showed you the two alleles separate when gametes are formed and each allele separate in equal proportions during gamete formation. And now let's look into this picture. This is a beautiful picture showing. So as you can see from the picture itself is extremely self-sufficient. The two alleles of a genotype RR are located on homologous chromosomes, which replicate in S phase of meiosis. You all are aware, you have studied cell cycle during S phase. The amount of DNA doubles. Now, there can be two scenarios. There can be a crossing over phenomenon and no crossing over phenomenon. Let's go for the first. So if there is a no crossing over phenomena, you can see in anaphase, the chromosomes are separating. And since no crossing over has taken place, the two chromatids of each chromosome segregate in anaphase 2 and are identical. So they have segregated and are identical. So we have a gamete. We have 4 gametes, 2 gametes containing capital R and 2 gametes containing small r. So this part, alleles separate when gametes are formed, alleles separate in equal proportions. Now let us imagine that a crossing over event has occurred. So in anaphase 1, you can see the red, a small part of the red and the blue has swapped. So the red chromosome has a capital R smaller combination and the blue chromosome has a capital R smaller combination. In anaphase 2, in anaphase 1, you can see the chromosomes separate, and in anaphase 2, since crossing over has taken place, the two chromatids are no longer identical and the different alleles segregate in anaphase 2. So in anaphase 2, the chromosomes are separated, but the chromosomes are not identical, because you can realize that in these two gametes, we are having a chromosome where recombination has taken place. But each gamete is having one chromosome containing one allele. So this is the chromosomal concept, a reflection of the at the chromosomal level, what Mendel tried to say in his Mendel's law of segregation. And now let's get into the second law of Mendel, that is a Mendel's dihybrid cross, that reveals the principle of independent assortment. Now, when we are coming to dihybrid cross, remember, two characters are now taken into consideration. What are the two characters? Round, yellow, wrinkled, green. Round, by now we have realized round is dominant to wrinkled. We have realized this because we did this in monohybrid experiment. And whenever there is this category kind of cross done, you can see the combination of gametes. So R, R, Y, Y. So when two categories of gametes will form from here, R, Y, R, Y. Again, when we have this kind of scenario, smaller, smaller, Y, Y. And when we have this scenario, it's smaller y, right? So that is what they have shown. They have shown a single gamete. So we are having this scenario of gametes. Now let's see the result of fertilization. As a result of fertilization, what did we get? We are getting round yellow seeds. So if the F1 is round yellow, it is evident that capital R is dominant to small r and capital Y is dominant to small y. It is evident because F1 progeny is showing the character of this parent only. So we can say that capital R is dominant to small r and capital Y is dominant to small y. Now, when we have a scenario of capital R, small y, this is self-fertilized with another capital R, capital Y, small y combination. What are the gametes we get from here? See, we'll get a gamete of capital R, small capital Y. We'll again get a gamete of capital R, small y. We will get a gamete of small r, capital Y. And we will get a gamete of small r, small y. So these are the four possible combination of gametes that can be obtained from a parent who is heterozygous for two characters in consideration. So these are the four categories of gamete obtained from one parent. Similarly, this second parent will also give these four categories of gametes. Now, let's see what will happen after that. So as I said, four categories of gametes obtained: capital R, capital Y, capital R, small y. Small r, small y, small r, capital Y. From one parent, the other parent has also given capital R, capital Y, capital R, small y. Small r, small y, small r, capital Y. And when you cross them, so these gametes when fused will give rise to zygotes. So we are getting 16 zygotes, 9 round yellow and 3 wrinkled green, 3 wrinkled yellow, 1 wrinkled green. So 9 round yellow. Okay. 1 wrinkled green. So these are the parents. Apart from that, we are getting 2 other combinations which were not found in the parents. 3 round green and 3 wrinkled yellow. So the conclusion from this experiment was that the allele encoding the color, there is no mixture of the 2 alleles. So the allele encoding for the color of the seed, that is round green, separates independently of the allele encoding for the shape of the seed, that is wrinkled. No, the allele encoding for color, sorry, the round wrinkled is the shape of the seed. So let me rephrase the sentence. The allele encoding for the color, that is a round, color is the yellow-green. So the allele encoding for the color, that is a yellow-green character of the seed, is independently assorted with respect to the allele encoding for the seed shape, that is round and wrinkled. So we are having 2 alleles in consideration, a color allele, yellow-green, a shape allele, round wrinkled. And these 2 characters are being independently assorted and are moving into the next generation. So that was Mendel's concept of independent assortment. So when we have done with independent assortment, now let's see how in a simplified manner in a branch diagram, we can get this kind of ratios. So this is the cross. As we understood that the color character is assorting independently with respect to the shape character. That is what the second law is, law of independent assortment. So one character is independently assorting with respect to the other. So we can assume that these 2 are 2 different crosses. So we can write, if we want, in this way, because they're independently assorting, even though they're moving together, but they're independently assorting. So when we have, so we can rephrase this cross and write it in this manner. So if we write it in this manner, what will be the amount of round plants we will be getting? 3 by 4. See, I put a dash here. Why dash? Because one allele is capital R. The other allele can be a capital R allele, or it can be a small r allele. Whatever the allele is, if it is a capital R, small r, we will be getting round seeds. So often it is written as with a dash. That means in this dash, we can put a capital R if we want, or a small r if you want, but whatever you put, the phenotype is round. So coming back to the cross. Now, when we cross something, when we are now dissecting this dihybrid cross, and we are thinking it in terms of 2 monohybrid crosses. So if we cross a heterozygous capital R smaller with another heterozygous capital R smaller, we'll be getting 3/4 round seed. By now we have all realized that, and we will be getting 1/4 wrinkled seed, right? Now, since wrinkled seed is our output of 2 recessive alleles, hence the 2 R are written together. Again, similarly, when we do this cross, capital Y, we put a blank. So this blank might contain a capital Y or a small y, depends, depending on it, whether it is a homozygous or heterozygous. So we'll be getting a capital Y phenotype 3/4 and a small y phenotype 1/4. If we consider this dihybrid cross and dissect it into 2 monohybrid cross. So this is at the individual level, the expected proportion of the first character. This is the expected proportion of the first character. And this is the expected proportion of the second character. Now, what will be the expected proportions of both the characters taken together? So let's look into this. Just what I showed you. So the first expected proportion of the first character, 3/4 round, 1/4 wrinkled. Expected proportions of the second character, 3/4 yellow, 1/4 green. But when I dissected these two characters separately, when I did these two characters separately, now I'm combining them. And when we combine, how do we do it? So let me do 3/4 round. Now I'll be combining. This is the 3/4 round I got. And this is the 1/4 wrinkled I got. So this was my output with the round character, round wrinkled character. Now I'm combining it with the yellow green color character. So what I will do, I'll multiply with 3/4 yellow, because this was the other ratio, and I'll multiply it with the 1/4 yellow, because I have to combine. For this one also, I'm combining 3/4 yellow and 1/4. Now, if you multiply 3/4 into 3/4, so it's 9/16 yellow round. 3/4 round into 1/4 green. So it is again 3/16 round green. Now let's multiply this two, is 1/4 wrinkled yellow, and this is 1/16 wrinkled green. So we go back to that ratio. So this is how you can often just play with the dihybrid cross. Pointer options. Okay. So let's see. This is what I showed you. Sorry. This is what I showed you just now. This is what I did. The individual crosses, because this was the expected proportion of first character and this was the expected proportion of second character. And from Mendel's law, it is very clear that the two characters are independently assorted. So if the expected proportions of the characters are multiplied in the defined manner, so I multiply the round with both the yellow, I multiplied the wrinkled with both the yellow. We could have done it the other way also. I could have multiplied the yellow with both round and wrinkled. I could have multiplied green with both round and wrinkled. We would always have arrived into this same conclusion. So we are coming to another cross to do it with a branch diagram manner. So we have here this one. So when we have a like this, so let us look at the independent crosses. Capital R, small r into small r, small r. The gametes from this cross will be capital R, small r, small r, small r. Okay. So we will be having half. This will give round. This will also give round. This will give wrinkle. This will also give wrinkle. So we'll be having half round and half wrinkled. Similarly, if I do the capital Y into small y cross, again, I'll be getting a capital Y, small y, and I'll be getting a small y, right? And now if I cross, just like the round one, so I'll be getting half yellow and half green. So this is the expected proportions of the first character, and this is the expected proportions of the second character. Let's see. So that is what I had done. So it's half round, half wrinkled, half yellow, half green. Now, as I showed you, half round multiplied with half, sorry, just a second. Since it is round, I'll not put a, no, this is, we are not getting, so I'll put it, sorry. This is not the previous cross. There's no homozygous round. So half round with half capital Y, small y, and half small y, small y. Again, I'll put half wrinkled with half capital Y, small y, and half small y, small y. Now look at the results. So what we'll be getting? We'll be getting 1/4 round yellow. We will be getting 1/4 round green. We will be getting, just I'm multiplying, 1/4 wrinkled yellow. If I multiply this into this, and again this into this, will be getting 1/4 wrinkled green. So for the unknown ratio, so this is an easy way for a dihybrid cross. This is an easy way to segregate the alleles, the characters separately, and then combine them to get the cross. This is only possible because these crosses follow the Mendelian's law of independent assortment, where the inheritance of the first character is totally independent of the inheritance of the second character. So this is what I showed you. Half round, giving me round yellow 1/4, round green 1/4, half wrinkled cross with both, giving me wrinkled yellow 1/4, wrinkled green 1/4. In dihybrid cross, as you saw, the two characters were taken out separately and done in a monohybrid pattern, and then they were combined. So let's now do a more complex cross, that is a monohybrid cross. In a dihybrid cross, as the name suggests, two characters are taken into consideration. In a trihybrid cross, 3 alleles will be taken into consideration. But the pattern is the same pattern that we are going to follow. So let's get into the cross. So this is a trihybrid cross. So we have a parent like this, and the parent is giving rise to a gamete like this. This F1 is now self-fertilized with another F1, which is similar to this. So we will be having, remember, 3 sets of alleles. That is 3 different monohybrid cross is to be combined to give rise to the result. For example, capital A into capital A, small a will be the one cross. Capital B, small b into capital B, small b will be the second cross. And capital C, small c into capital C, small c will be the third cross. So if by now you have all understood, so we will be having 3/4 of capital A and 1/4 of small a. This will give a result like this. For this cross, 3/4 of capital B and 1/4 of small b. For the final cross, it will be 3/4 of capital C and 1/4 of small c. So putting our concepts of what we learned in the previous slide, we are now taking this trihybrid cross and we are now segregating it into 3 monohybrid crosses, and now we will combine. So what we will do, let us see. Let me do it. Let me start with a smaller pen ink color. Let me change the ink color. Okay. So what I'll take 3/4 A, right? And I will multiply with 3/4 B and 1/4 BB. But again, I have to take into consideration the C part also. So 3/4 C, 1/4 CC. Similarly, this will also be multiplied with 3/4 C, 1/4 small c, small c. So what, look at the product I'll get. 3 multiply this one. So I'll be getting 4 into 4, 16, 16 into 4, this will be 64. And on the top, I'll be getting 27. And the genotype will be capital A, capital B, capital C. Let me do another one. Let us look into this one. So 3/4 into 1/4 into 1/4. So this is 3/4 into 1/4. This is 3/4. Just a second. 3/4 into 3/4. So this was the first one I did. Now I'll go for this one. 3/4 into 3/4 into 1/4. I have to multiply all the combinations. So it is 9/64. And what are the combinations you are getting here? A, capital B, small c, small c. So this is how the process goes on. Just to show you. So these were the gametes. And now you see. This is I showed you. So I divide 3/4. The A group into, I start with dividing 3/4 and 1/4 small a. Then I divide the B, 3/4 B, 1/4 B. Then I divide the C. And then I multiply all the possible combinations. And thus I will get a trihybrid result. If we put a trihybrid cross on a checkerboard, it will take much time as compared to calculating the trihybrid phenotypic ratio using the forked line. So this is the forked line method for calculating the F2 phenotypic ratio, be it for a trihybrid cross or be it for a dihybrid cross. So with this, we end our class today.